Good afternoon and welcome to episode 26 of the Jacksonian. As I have with me is the co-host of Locked On College Basketball and the host of Locked On TarHeels himself, the one and only Isaac Schade, as we go over what's going on with North Carolina before and after how they did against Duke. Can Hubert Davis lead the Tar Heels to a national title? Will Matt Brown be coaching his final year in North Carolina football? Where's Drake May getting drafted? Who's going to be in the Final Four? Who's the last four in? Who's the first four out in all of college basketball? I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be a wild ride for episode 26, and you're going to enjoy it. I guarantee it, everyone. How you doing, my man?
Jackson, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be on the Jacksonian.
Well, it's an honor having you on, man. So I'd tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
For sure. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm a massive Braves outside of college basketball. Anything being a Braves fan is probably my biggest fandom of something I don't cover. But Falcons fan, still trying to recover from 28-3. Hawks, although I don't really hone in on NBA stuff all that crazy too much. So there's that. And it's funny, I actually live about 2 hours south of Kansas City and have been here about a decade and a half. So my wife and I have kind of become Chiefs fans, having lived here for a long time now. So we're kind of looking forward to the Super Bowl on Sunday.
Oh man, it's gonna be fantastic, and it's funny though, before 2019, nobody really thought of the Chiefs as that team that could win the Super Bowl. They always fell short in the postseason, but that all changed with Patrick Mahomes.
That's right. And a lot of my in-laws all went to Texas Tech, so that's another part of it too. Is they're all big Mahomes people, and so we've all just kind of got in on it because of that.
Well, I'm not going to say too much about Texas Tech football because I don't want to get you in trouble with your in-laws, man.
There you go. I appreciate that.
But, it's going to be fun. I mean, but, there's a lot of positives, especially with the Big 12. You talked a little bit about the Big 12 on today's episode of Locked On College Basketball. You tuned in with Locked On Big 12 host Drake Toll talking about the Big 12 being the best.
That's right.
Does the Big East get up there with the Big 12 as well? Is there like a 1A, 1B for the Big 12 Big East?
I wouldn't call it 1A, 1B because the Big East has the top end elite side of things. And in fact, I'm going off the cuff when I say this. There might be more teams in the Big East that I could see getting to a Final Four this year, for example, than in the Big 12. I'd have to go through and think through that more firmly. But the Big East does not have the depth that the Big 12 does. In fact, for a lot of this season, the SEC had rated higher than the Big East at KenPom in terms of conference strength. That's flipped to where the Big East is second now with SEC third. But no, I would still put the Big 12 above the Big East overall because of that depth.
Well, I will say the Final Four is going to be wild, but is this the year where we're seeing Purdue make it to the Final Four? Or are they just going to fall apart like always?
That's a great question. I do not think they will fall apart. I think if you made me choose between the two, I think they are more likely to make the Final Four than they are to fall apart. It's Matt Painter is a good enough coach that it's, for me, a matter of if not when they make it Final Four, win an NCAA championship, whatever it is. In fact, they were a couple ridiculous Virginia plays away from moving along back in Virginia's 2019 national championship season. If you remember, that crazy Purdue Virginia game was phenomenal. But here's what it is for me specifically with Purdue, Jackson, is Zach Edey is still Zach Edey. That's never changing. But then Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, who were that freshman backcourt last year, the jump from freshmen to sophomores is massive. part of their issue last year, like even if it had been Fletcher Lawyer and a senior in the backcourt with him, or Braden Smith and a junior in the backcourt with him. But unfortunately, it was those two freshmen. And as talented as they are, that just kind of fell apart. And against Fairleigh Dickinson, when things got tough, you could see them just clenching up. But my man, this year, Braden Smith has elevated to a completely different level where on any given night, he's putting up some numbers that almost could be triple doubly in nature. And then you add to that, I think maybe the key for them might be Lance Jones, who's a transfer that came in from Southern Illinois. He's been playing really, really well for Purdue, and I think just might be a piece that puts them over the top. You add Trey Kaufman-Renn to that, and other Mason Gillis, what he's able to do from the 3-point line, and I think Purdue is much more likely to make a Final Four than fall apart.
Well, I'm curious to see if this year will be the year for the Boilermakers, but a team that I've been really thinking about, and this is a special one for your co-host, Andy Patton, and Locked On Zads, and he may not like this question, if he's watching this episode, but is this going to be the year for the first time since 1998 where Gonzaga misses the March Madness tourney, or will they make it back to March Madness this year? Because, I kind of feel like that they are blessed by the basketball gods with this Saturday being a matchup against Kentucky. Now, you don't see a big non-conference matchup in February like you used to.
I was going to say, we used to, man. It was great. I love that we're getting this right now. Yes, 100%. Jackson, here's the thing. Gonzaga not only has that tournament streak, or dating back to 98, they have made the Sweet 16 8 tournaments in a row dating back to 2015. What's funny about your question here is that Andy and I do a bold prediction show ahead of the season. One of mine this season was that Gonzaga's Sweet 16 streak would end this year. As we look at it now, apparently my prediction wasn't bold enough, because I'm less concerned about, are they going to make a Sweet 16? And as you said, will they make it at all? Here's what I'll say, Jackson. If the NCAA regular season ended today, Gonzaga would not make it in as an at-large team. That said, they could very well win the West Coast Conference auto bid. I want to remind everybody that the way it goes in the West, the way the West Coast is set it up, is to ensure that one of their top teams makes it into March Madness. There is a bye through to the semifinals. I think it's for the top 2 seeds in the regular season, and so that's probably going to be St. Mary's, who's really, really, really turned their season around after a rough start, and then Gonzaga. That said, Gonzaga and St. Mary's played this last weekend up in Spokane. St. Mary's got a tight win at Gonzaga in the kennel there, and so obviously they'll have to go back and play in Moraga later this season. But here's the thing for me, Jackson. Gonzaga, I don't think there's going to be enough on this. Like, winning at Rupp this weekend would be huge and get them a good quad 1 win. Especially because Kentucky, man, that defense is woeful right now. They're outside of the top 100 at KenPom. But outside of that and winning at St. Mary's later this season, I don't know that there's enough left in the West Coast Conference schedule for them to get there. That's part of why Gonzaga always plays such a tough non-con. So if none of those things happen, then Gonzaga, for me, their only hope of getting in is to win the West Coast Conference tournament, which they absolutely could do, but they didn't win at home against St. Mary's on Saturday. So it's uphill sledding for the Bulldogs right now.
Yeah, because, I'm going to be honest with you. If I don't see Gonzaga in the March Madness this year, I feel like something weird is happening. I'm just going to be like pinching myself going, wait a minute, am I in a simulation or something? Okay, let me pinch myself. No, it's real. Because that's what it's going to feel like for me.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's just a staple of what we're used to in the tournament, but all things must come to an end, and we'll see if this is the year for that for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, because, not only with the Zags, but with Michigan State, things look dire for them, but they look like they could get in, but I could be wrong. What do you think about that, Isaac?
With Michigan State specifically? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, I mean, as we look at the, I'm pulling up the Big Ten standings right now. They right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tied for sixth in the Big Ten with Indiana. I mean, they're behind Minnesota, behind Northwestern. Um, Michigan State, I would say right now, like if it ended the day, they're on the outside looking in and have work to do. For me, anyway, I haven't looked to see if Lunardi has them in right now. Um, I'm kind of looking, scanning through here as we talk, but same kind of thing. I mean, they're definitely on tenuous footing at best, the Spartans, and so definitely going to have some work to. Joe Lunardi does have them in right now as a 7 seed, so that we'll see with that, but it's the kind of thing for Michigan State. Bracket Matrix has them at ninth. If you're not familiar with Bracket Matrix, folks, that's a site that aggregates a bunch of different bracketology and brings together the aggregates of that. So it's just kind of an all-encompassing look. For the Spartans, they got work to do, but as we all know, March is all about Izzo, and I expect them to do what they need to do. But again, it's not they are not safe right now. I'm looking at their upcoming schedule. They get Illinois at home this weekend. They win that one, could be in good shape. But then they get away games at Penn State, at Michigan, host Iowa State. They got to go to Purdue. They host Northwestern at home and then wrap up at Indiana. So they need to win those games that they're supposed to win. And maybe if they can clip either Illinois or Purdue or both, good grief, that would probably solidify things for them.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need some big wins for sure. But as for the rest of the bubble watch, I was thinking about who's the last four buys, the last four in, and the first four out in your
Yeah.
eyes, Isaac?
So here's what we have to say about this right out of the gate. This is a literal daily moving floating target that we can never hone in because there's still enough games left. Most teams have 8 or 9 regular season games left, at least in terms of the Power 6 conferences, which for those who think Power 5 because of football and basketball, we add in the Big East to that. There's enough games left for teams to move off the bubble into safety. There's enough time for teams left to move off the bubble into obscurity to the NIT or worse. And so for me, it is always a floating target. And obviously we got to wait to see if somebody makes a surprise run in their conference tournament. We got to wait to see if there's bid thieves the week before as we get the mid-major and lower major tournaments. So all of that, Jackson, let's just acknowledge that up front. As of today, here's who I have, my last 4 buys. So these are the teams that are fully in the field, don't have to go to Dayton and play in the first 4. My 4 today, 2 SEC teams, an ACC team, and a Big East team. We've got Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Virginia, and Seton Hall. Of those 4, Virginia is the team that I feel best about continuing to move up safely into the field, right? As the last 4 buy, they are already in my eyes. But with what the ACC has to offer them and the way they've been rounding into form lately, I think they could pretty easily move in as a third ACC team comfortably along with Carolina and Duke. And then last 4 in, so these are the teams that would have to go to Dayton. I've got Providence, who on Wednesday night got a massive overtime victory over Creighton. Great win for the Friars there. Wake Forest, Cincinnati, and Florida. So that's my last 4 in. And currently my first 4 out are St. John's, Colorado, Washington State, and Seton Hall.
Ooh, that's a good one right there. And I mean, St. John's missing the tourney. That's gonna suck. Don't get me wrong in Rick Pitino's first year, but at the same time,
they
it's a
win
heck of a
basketball
lot.
games.
It's a lot better than where they were in past years.
Oh my word, you're not wrong about that in any way. Yep, absolutely. And it's funny because the preseason expectation was that St. John's would not be phenomenal this year, but that they would probably be able to do enough in Big East play to get an at-large bid and get in. As we sit here right now, they are 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, tied for 6th in the Big East with Butler and Providence at 6 and 6. Let's look ahead at St. John's schedule. They got to go to Marquette this weekend, who Marquette's been rounding back into shape. Then they got to go to Providence. Man, you could lose either or both of those games. Home to Seton Hall, at Georgetown, home to Creighton, at Butler, who's playing their way into bubble consideration right now, by the way, then at DePaul, home to Georgetown to round things out. So they should easily win those last two games. If they can take care of business before then, could be in good shape. But as we sit here today talking, Jackson, St. John's has lost 5 of 7. So even those games that they should take care of, I don't have strong hopes that they're going to. So really curious to see what happens with them. Love Joel Soriano. I think he's a great big. And they've got other guys that just need to keep rounding together as a team. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, it'd be a good idea. It'd be a great idea to beat Marquette for sure. I mean, you better upset the Shakalakas.
Yes. I think that's a good way to advance in basketball. You know what? We should beat our next opponent, who's really good, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, that'll help you get into March Madness. I mean, get
For sure.
yourself a couple of big wins in the regular season, and then at least make it to the title game. At least.
Yeah, 100%. And the problem for St. John's, though, Marquette right now is on a 6-game winning streak. They've really rounded into form after those losses earlier in Big East play to back-to-back to Seton Hall and Butler. So Tyler Kolek's really coming back around. So we'll see what happens there for Shaka Smart's team.
Well, and I was thinking about after Clemson beat North Carolina for the second time all time in Chapel Hill.
That's right.
That first time was in January 2020 with Coach Brad Burnell. I mean, ironically, Coach Burnell was part of both of those wins in Chapel Hill. Where does this land Clemson in the field?
I don't know that it does yet. The problem is they had such a strong non-conference schedule, or non-conference record. Let me put it that way. They did have some good wins. You look back at that non-conference schedule, in getting wins over Alabama, which has grown better and better, over South Carolina, which looks better and better, over TCU, which looks better and better. And so they entered ACC play 11-1. Their sole loss being a 2-point loss at Memphis, which ironically enough, that loss looks worse and worse now as Memphis has been really struggling. And then here's the problem for Clemson. Prior to that North Carolina win, which is really, really big time for them, they, in ACC play, had lost 6 of their last 9. The ironic thing, though, is that of their last 6 prior to the Carolina win, those 3 losses were by a combined 4 points, or 5 points, excuse me. So just as easy as they had lost 3 of their last 6, they could now be on a 7-game winning streak if just a couple plays had gone different. So Clemson could round themselves back into this. Maybe this is a push back in the right direction for Brad Brownell's team. They're at Syracuse this weekend. Really curious to see what happens there. But as you look at the rest of Clemson's schedule, they don't have to play North Carolina again. They don't have to play Duke again. And they don't have to play Virginia again. So schedule-wise for Clemson, man, if they could string some wins together, they can absolutely put themselves solidly into the field. Right now, as I'm looking at Lunardi's stuff, he's got 4 ACC teams in. So it's Carolina, Virginia, Duke, and I'm scrolling to see if it is Clemson or who the 4th ACC team is just in real time here as we're talking. It is, haven't found it yet. One more region to look at. This is great. Oh, it is. He's got Clemson in as an 8 seed right now, but kind of tumbling down. So, that is in as, a safe team in the bracket, but it's the same as we talked about with Michigan State. I don't know that it's enough yet, right? Like if we were doing bubble watch today, they wouldn't be a lock, and I wouldn't even call them a should be in. I would put them in like more work to do status.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on Saturday between Clemson and Syracuse. Because, I mean, that looks like a perfect trap game all over the place.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, coming off of a big win, they've got to go up there and take care of business. And so, here's the thing. I believe in Clemson's roster. It's the shocking thing to me was not the wins. The shocking thing to me has been the losing streak based on what they have. I love PJ Hall. I love how Ian Shefflin's this dude that can just muck it up and get offensive rebounds and surprise you because he looks just like, who is this dude getting every offensive rebound? I love Joe Girard as a shooter coming in from Syracuse, which, by the way, that's going to be his return back to his stomping grounds for that. And then you get Chase Hunter, their main guard, who I really think is a good guard. And so Clemson has the pieces. They just need to put it all together.
Yeah, I mean, they need something good for sure. But North Carolina, I was thinking about them. Now they lost to Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Duke. And now they lost to Clemson, but they still lead the ACC in regular season standings.
That's right.
What's going on with the Tar Heels?
Well, that's a great question. So, as you said, right now, Carolina has a 1-game lead in the standings over, interestingly enough, it's not Duke in second place, it's Virginia right now, a full game back of Carolina, and they're a half game ahead of Duke. So, specifically, are you asking what's going on with Carolina in terms of dropping those 2 games recently?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's look at it this way. Let's take them individually. With the Georgia Tech loss, which was the Tuesday leading up to the Duke game, it's interesting. On Locked on Tar Heels, I had said this is not a trap game. And here's what I specifically mean by that. I don't mean that North Carolina was not going to lose the game. A trap game is when you overlook a team because you don't think they can beat you and because you're looking ahead. The reason I say it's not a trap game is because Georgia Tech had North Carolina's attention. Georgia Tech had already beaten Duke. They almost beat Duke twice, by the way. And so in that respect, it was not a trap game because Carolina was focused on it. It's just going to Atlanta. They had a lead. Carolina did by double-digit points in the first half. Messed around a little bit. Georgia Tech found their way back, and then Carolina tried to rebound, did what I thought was enough to win. Georgia Tech got a nice, difficult layup on their last offensive possession to go back ahead. And then, quite frankly, I thought R.J. Davis got fouled on the last play of the game and should have been at the free throw line. But here's the problem, Jackson. The Tar Heels should have been able to do enough earlier in that game where you don't need the referee to blow his whistle on that play to bank on winning that way. So that was about North Carolina not doing enough and being disciplined enough down the stretch to win the basketball game. To me, again, I truly do not believe that was a trap game because Georgia Tech had their attention. As for the Clemson loss, it's so funny. My big thing on Tuesday's show ahead of that game was North Carolina is going to have a very difficult time quickly refocusing and getting dialed into this game to come down off the emotional, physical, mental high of beating Duke and everything that goes into one of those rivalry games. And just talked about the danger of that. Right out of the gate, Clemson blitzes the Tar Heels 15-2. Right? So 3 minutes and 28 seconds into the game, North Carolina is down 13. And then Armando Bacot puts this team on their back and they go on a run, get it down to, it grew to as big as 16 with about 2 minutes to go. They got it down to 9.5. Eventually, Carolina ties it at 70 in the second half. But from there, Clemson finished the final 4 minutes of the game plus 4, a 10-6 run, including a 7-0 run to make it 77-0. So here was the thing, Jackson. Carolina, everything between that first 3:28 and the final 4, North Carolina led Clemson in between that by 13, 68-55. The problem was Carolina wasn't ready from the tip, and they weren't able to close well, I think particularly because they had dug themselves out of such a hole and kind of ran out of gas. So they weren't ready from the beginning, and 3:28 of a game is enough to put you in a hole too deep that you can't climb out of.
Yeah, I mean, it was, man, I was sad to see Tar Heels getting beat by Clemson. I'm not going to lie. Because, I mean, it was just, but on the bright side, Miami's in trouble.
And that could be a good or bad thing, right? Like, they're coming off of having scored 38 points against Virginia. I mean, that's like, what on earth? I can't figure out with Miami because kind of similar to what I said about Clemson, all the pieces are there, right? Where you think on paper, this Miami team should be really good. I think the problem is Matthew Cleveland has not been Jordan Miller, who was one of, I thought kind of under the radar, perhaps their most important player last year. and then nobody's Isaiah Wong, right? And it's just you can't replicate that. Norchad O'Meara is still great. Matthew Cleveland has been okay. And you look at Nigel Pack and Wooga Poplar and these guys, and it's like Pack without Wong, it's just not the same level of things. And so Carolina should be able to go down and win at Miami, but they are a talented enough basketball team. And, Carolina, who has to go down to Miami and then up to Syracuse next week, man, that's a tough back-to-back.
Yeah, especially on Tuesday night. I mean, yeah, Syracuse gonna try to show the Tar Heels what Valentine's Day is all about.
That's right, especially after North Carolina really, really gave it to them earlier this season. You know that Syracuse is going to be looking for some revenge there from that 103-67 beatdown.
Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to be getting beat down like that. That's bad.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at some of the stats that I got in my little notepad. The Tar Heels are 23rd in points, 167th in field goal percentage, 137th in points allowed, 9th in total rebounds, 11th in defensive rebounds, 69th in offensive rebounds. What can they do to get those stats up on the offensive rebounds? Because they're going to have to score a lot of second chance points if they want to win the Natty this year.
That's a good question. As many people may know, under the Roy Williams era, North Carolina played a two-big system. Typically, like towards the end of the era, it would have been like Bryce Johnson and Kennedy Meeks, or the 2017 national championship team, Kennedy Meeks and Isaiah Hicks, or you go back to the 09 championship, Tyler Hansbrough and Deion Thompson, for example. Carolina in the Hubert Davis era is not playing two bigs. It's, this year, for example, you've got Armando Bacot with a small ball Harrison Ingram as a 4. And so it's a different level. What's interesting is that Armando Bacot is traditionally a phenomenal offensive rebounder. Harrison Ingram has turned into a phenomenal offensive rebounder himself. Prior to his, was it either 4 or 6 rebounds against Clemson this week, he had 5 straight games with 13 or more rebounds in totality. Specific to the offensive glass, in Carolina's win, I believe it was the Florida State win, he had 6 offensive rebounds. No Florida State player had more than 6 rebounds total, offense and defense combined. And so I think key for North Carolina in that offensive rebounding battle is getting both Bacot and Harrison Ingram to the glass with a little bit of help from some of the other guys, like Cormac Ryan coming down to help. Jalen Withers, when he's in the game, is athletic enough to get to the offensive glass. Same is true for Seth Trimble, although he missed the Clemson game, and we're waiting to hear on his status. By the way, I thought that was a key factor in Carolina losing to Clemson. His absence was felt, particularly in Joe Girard going off from deep. But so specific, Jackson, to your offensive rebounding question, it's an issue of effort and energy and how much attention Carolina wants to pay to it. So, for example, on days when the ball is going through the basket, you're just frankly not going to get as many offensive rebounds. And so it's just something that also, one other factor in it that I'll mention is under Hubert Davis, Carolina is taking a lot more three-point attempts than they did under Roy Williams. What happens to rebounds when you're shooting threes? They're going off at all sorts of different places. When they were shooting few under Roy Williams, it's more, you know where those offensive rebounds are going a little more capably. So that's another factor in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the rebounds total. But I noticed that Hubert Davis' coaching career so far at North Carolina, he got you guys to the Final Four as an 8 seed. Embarrassed Coach K in his final game ever. And then that second season, you go from preseason number 1 to saying we don't want to go to NIT. But now you're leading the ACC again. I mean, do you think having a good season so far has saved Hubert Davis a little bit, or was there never any discussion about him being on a hot seat?
There was discussion about a hot seat, but not from anybody that matters, if I can kind of put it that way, right? Like there were some kind of random people that just, I think, for the clickbaitiness of it, said, "Oh man, this is a hot seat situation for you." Come on, man. No, absolutely not. This program, with Bubba Cunningham as the athletic director at North Carolina, was not going to hire a brand new head coach, Hubert Davis, who literally his only head coaching experience was Carolina's JV team, and say, "Look, you got 2 years, and if you get a third bad one, you're out." That was just never going to be the case. Now, yes, 100%. Carolina's regular season, Hubert Davis's first year, not great. Last year, clearly even worse. But I think part of last year's issue was unrealistic expectations foisted on the team by making them preseason number one when that was never where they should have been, if we're just taking an honest look at that. This year's team is the first time that Coach Davis now is really able to fully see what is it, the complementary parts that my roster needs to have to play the style I want. Even still, there are holdovers in terms of like Armando and RJ that are from prior to his era. And that's not a knock, because I know that he wants Armando and RJ on his teams because they're phenomenal. But even still, my point is, he has not yet been able to fully construct a team made up of his selections. Now, obviously, he had a hand in recruiting those guys, so I hear that argument. But this is the first time, and you really see it. I think the loss of Caleb Love to Arizona has been better for both Carolina and for Caleb Love. I think that has been a win-win situation where Caleb is in a better situation at Arizona, and they're having a really strong year, and that North Carolina, and in particular RJ Davis, are in a better position now just because of that change. So I don't want to call it addition by subtraction, because that's not it. Caleb Love is a phenomenal basketball player. He's a great young man. It's just it's working better, and the pieces are more complementary this year. So no, I don't think this ever was a hot seat situation internally. That was way too early, in my opinion. But to your question, does it help stave that off? Absolutely it does, right? You would never want to have 3 straight so regular seasons, and this is clearly the best regular season of Hubert Davis's career. However, let's look at this and say there are still 8 regular season games left. As Coach Davis has been saying in his pre-practice thought of the day recently, there's still more to be said, and there's still more to be done. This team hasn't accomplished anything yet, because we're, great, you're at the top of the ACC standings, but there's 8 more games left, and you could drop all 8 of them, right? Like, that's a realistic thing that could happen. So this team has a lot more to accomplish. But as things stand right now, they're in really good shape, and Hubert Davis should be really proud of the job he and his assistants and the players have done.
That is true, and plus there's an ACC tournament to go, and then there's March Madness. So, I mean, it's like you can't just win your conference tournament, win the regular season title, and go, "Oh, we're home free, yay!" and then you fall apart against a Fairline Dickinson or a random 13 seed or a 14,
Right.
15.
Because that's what people remember. People like you and I who talk about this all the time are going to remember regular season champions and conference champions. But all that most people are going to remember is Purdue losing to Fairleigh Dickinson, or Virginia losing to UMBC, albeit they won the championship a year later. But those are the things that people remember and talk about and go down in the history books. So, you got to finish it off. The NCAA tournament needs to be a punctuation of an exclamation point, not an ellipsis.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be falling apart in March. I mean, because it's great that you can win in the regular season, but you gotta win the postseason. That's all. That's what really counts right there.
That's right.
And I was thinking about Matt Brown for North Carolina football. Now, we saw Saban retiring, and we saw like a lot of the coaching carousel, but for 2024. What's your take on Matt Brown for after 2024, during 2024? Is this going to be like his last year of his second stint in Chapel Hill, or does he have a few more left in the tank? Because, 2023 was a very disappointing, deflating season, it feels like.
Yeah, definitely down the stretch it was, just like 2022 was. Here's what I would say if I was answering it today. The same thing we've said about a couple other things today. if I was making a call today, I would say this is not his last season. Last February, about a year ago, Coach Brown signed another 1-year extension, which he's now done for the last 4 years. And that extension could keep him as the head coach through 2028. Will it? I don't know. But the fact that he's continued to sign that extension builds onto that initial 5-year deal that he signed back in 2019. The thing for Coach Brown, he's energized. He loves what he's doing. As we've seen some other, older coaches kind of be done with it because of NIL, because of transfer portal, things like that. In basketball, we've seen that with Jay Wright, who could still be in the prime of his basketball career right now. I think he was just done. He's like, I don't like this landscape anymore. We see Saban getting out when he probably still had plenty of good years left.
Jeff
Mac Brown,
Hafley.
yeah, great point. And I think that's a great example too, Jackson, because it's like this, like you think about it, would you rather be the head coach at Boston College or a coordinator for the Packers? Now, whatever, you can weigh the merits of those two things, but I think what we're going to see that kind of thing more and more, where it's like, oh, you mean I could just go be a coordinator and not have to recruit and not have to recruit other players, re-recruit my own players, visits, everything else, and I can just be a football coach and I can have an off season? Sign me up for that all day long. I think we're going to continue to see more of that happen. But for Mac Brown, to me, he still seems to be enjoying it and loving it. He's in some of the best shape he's been recently. He doesn't seem overly turned off. Like, I'm sure it's harder because of NIL and the transfer portal on him and his life and things, but it doesn't feel like the burden to him that it does others. He enjoys helping these young men. Do I see him coaching all the way through the end of his, January 2028? I don't know about that. But if I had to make a call today, I'd say there's at least more than 1 year left.
Yeah, I mean, for right now, I'm kind of feeling like 2024, 2025, maybe 2026. But, who knows? Maybe he could,
Who knows?
like when he retires, maybe he could be at ESPN or CBS, Fox
Well, I
Sports,
mean, that's
or
that's
here
what
at
he
the
did.
Jacksonian.
Yeah, that's what he was doing before he came back to Carolina, was studio guy, like what we just learned this week that Nick Saban's going to be doing. He's phenomenal at that. I love what he brings. Obviously, his temperament, his jovial vibe is something that works really well, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see him get back into it. But I also, yeah, I don't know. We'll just wait and see what he wants to do with his life.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to your point about Nick Saban going to College Game Day, when I read that he's groomed as a replacement for Lee Corso, I thought Pat McAfee would be groomed as a replacement for Lee Corso.
I'm right with you, because that game day needs kind of a wild card, and that for so long has been Lee Corso. Let's honor that man for everything he's done. I know it's kind of tough to watch right now. I get that and I hear it. But man, his legacy on that show and in college football is going to leave an indelible mark. And yeah, like, I know Pat McAfee isn't everyone's cup of tea, kind of similar. Like, I think about Dickie V as an example of the same thing.
Right.
But that's somebody who loves football, who can be serious when he needs to be, and who I think has some really good thought. Like, he thinks well and he's got good ideas. It just comes off as like a caricature kind of to some people, and so I hear that and get it. But I'm right with you. I had seen him as that kind of replacement, and so I'm curious to see, like, because Saban will bring the veteran cachet that Lee Corso brings, but I don't see him being the wild card that Corso is. So maybe they kind of combine that between what McAfee brings and what Saban's immense knowledge. And I think when we've seen him in studio or, on the set, on location, I feel like he's done a really good job. And so I think there's a ton that he'll bring to that game day team.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2024. But if 2024, which likely will be the last year of Corso, which I thought 2023 or 2022 would be.
Yeah.
But if 2024 is the last year, I say let Corso pick the location. I mean, I'll be honest, for week 1, they should have gone to like Indiana, Ohio State, or Colorado, TCU. No offense to the TarHeels.
None taken.
But it was just kind of like, I kind of felt like they were just kind of like sucking up to South Carolina more, not so much of South Carolina, but because of the SEC.
Hmm.
And, to our point about like Halfley leaving for the Packers, I mean, he says it's the NIL deal, but I think it's a little more than that. I'm kind of feeling like Boston College is going to get the shaft like Washington State and Oregon State did. And if things are really hitting the fan in the ACC and we see like Florida State leave, does North Carolina stay in the ACC or do they shoot for the SEC or Big Ten? And can they keep Duke, North Carolina State, and Virginia, Wake Forest on their schedule? Or is it two of the four or one of the four?
I think it's tough because I love the ACC. I love the history of it, the tradition of it. But let's be honest, the ACC is not the same thing that it's always been. It's like almost half of it's made up of old Big E schools now, and so it's already an amalgamation conference now. Although there are so many of those original members in, but um, North Carolina needs to do what's in its own best interest as an institution. For me, if that means leaving the ACC, I think the better of the other two options is the Big Ten over the SEC, just in terms of conference profile with what North Carolina does. So, for example, the University of North Carolina has all these varsity athletics that they support. The SEC doesn't have all of those. The Big Ten does. So, North Carolina, if they went to the SEC, some of those varsity athletic teams would have to become club teams. Whereas if they went to the Big Ten, they'd be able to keep all of those and continue to support them. Another profile thing is that from an academic standpoint, the Big Ten is seen as more of an academically prestigious conference, while the SEC, not that it's not academically prestigious, but the Big Ten is seen as a step above that. That's North Carolina's academic profile as well. And I think obviously a lot of people would love to see Carolina and Duke, Carolina and NC State, Carolina and Virginia continue to stay together. But I mean, we've seen it in other rivalries. How long ago did Texas A&M leave the Big 12 for the SEC? Now I know they're going to be reunited with Texas next season, which is hilarious to me.
Oh man, I'm cueing the Peanuts music for that.
Oh, right. But like at the end of the day, as much as we would miss what I think is truly the best rivalry in sports, Carolina and Duke in basketball, the Tar Heels need to do what's in their own best institutional interest, even if that comes at the expense of the Duke Carolina or Duke NC State or whatever rivalries. And it while you would love it to be a hey, we're coming together kind of situation, these are two different universities, one public, one private. Like there's all these differences to them, and so ultimately, I think North Carolina is going to group together more so than with Duke or NC State, more so with the kind of Florida State and Clemson side of things, these brands at the top of it. Because I know that Duke is a big national brand basketball-wise, but North Carolina is a bigger brand institutionally than are the Blue Devils.
That's true, and that the basketball program is basically the saving grace for Duke. I mean, yeah, the football program's okay. I mean,
yeah. And look, Mike Elko has done a great job in a short time, and I know he's gone now, but they're coming back, and they're in a good space. I'm curious to see what happens under a new regime now, but it just right, like you said, it is basketball in which they hang their hat solely.
And, not everybody's going to remember the Wallace Wade era at Duke. Because, I know people talk about David Cutcliffe, Mike Elko, but, for me, I'm making sure I'm thinking about the Wallace Wade era because, like, that's the band that really made Duke really awesome in football.
Right. Yep. So we'll see if Manny Diaz can do it. I'm really curious.
I mean, right now, I kind of feel like he's the Will Muschamp of the ACC. But like you said, I guess we'll wait and find out and see. But as we wrap up episode 26 of the Jacksonian, and again, congratulations on getting to 2,000 subs at Locked On College Basketball, and congrats to getting past 7,000 subs at Locked On TarHeels.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
yeah.
Jackson. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, anytime, man. And for those who want to get some Tar Heel knowledge or some college basketball knowledge, because I'll be honest, man, there's a reason I had you on. College basketball was one of them. Because I'm okay with college basketball. I do all right at, but you're one of the experts for me, man.
Thank you. That means a lot, Jackson. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, man. And for those who want to talk with you about North Carolina or Bubble Watch or who's going to win it all, Final Four, or who's the best conference in college basketball, or can North Carolina win it all, or can everybody find you?
That's a great question. I am most active from a social media standpoint on Twitter. I have accounts on Facebook and Instagram and stuff, but I'm very heavily active on Twitter, and so you can track me down there. My DMs are open, and so feel free to shoot me a DM on there. But as for Locked On Tar Heels, you can come find us anywhere you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. If for those watching, you can see all the links on screen there that Jackson has so graciously put up. And so come check us out there Monday to Friday every week. We do a live postcast after every North Carolina basketball game. For Locked On College Basketball, same thing on YouTube and everywhere you get audio podcasts 5 days a week. My co-host Andy Patton is a great guy. Jackson talked about him earlier. He also hosts Locked On Zags for our network and does a phenomenal job with that. We have some great guests on there as well. And so, man, it's an absolute blast, Jackson. I tell you, the opportunity to literally every day get to talk national college basketball is an absolute dream for me, and that is never lost on me. And the same thing about the Tar Heels. It's so great to be able to share about a phenomenal university with so many phenomenal athletic teams and student athletes and coaches. And so it truly is an honor to get to do what I do.
I'll tell you one thing. It's an honor having you on, and it's an honor getting to know you. That's for sure. Because it's like it's pretty awesome talking with you. And if you love this content, if you love some of these Jacksonian episodes, and you love the reaction videos of my takes on college football and NFL, like, comment, subscribe to @Jackson099 to @JacksonJohnson979 on YouTube. And also give me a follow on Jackson09960335 on Twitter, where I just kind of run my mouth about everything else across the world, so to speak. But also check me out on Instagram and Threads @JacksonJohnson543908. Till next time, this is Jackson Johnson, host of Jacksonian, wishing you all a wonderful good afternoon, and to stay safe and stay warm. It's cold outside.